My name is Linda Garder, and I work as the cultural officer in the Norwegian Embassy in Rome. And I'm really glad to welcome all of you to our first session here digitally of the workshop Challenges, Paradoxes and Exchange, Gender Equality and Diversity in the Visual Arts. So this is a part of a wider framework and project, Be Smart, Be Equal, initiated by the Nordic Embassies in Rome in partnership with EWMD Rome and Circolo Scandinavo, and it's sponsored by the Nordic Council of Ministers. So Be Smart, Be Equal aims to create an Italian-Nordic dialogue on the main challenges in achieving a gender-equal labor market with equal opportunities and a proper work-life balance in different fields, with various events and initiatives during this year in 2021. So now, by this 2 days workshop, we wish to focus on equality and diversity in the visual arts and to open a platform of exchange between Italian and Nordic artists, curators, researchers, and stakeholders from the sectors, with questions such as, how do we work towards a more inclusive and equal art sector? Are there any differences for female and male artists? And what if they wish to establish a family? How can we find a common language and develop an action plan to create more equal working conditions for visual artists, regardless of gender and social status? And nonetheless, also for a more equal representation of gender and cultural diversity in the visual arts? And which tools are needed to enact sustainable changes for the working conditions in the visual arts? So first of all, in this moment, in this meeting here, we wish to give some input and overview of the situation in Scandinavia and Italy with our wonderful speakers here present. And afterwards, we will be in good hands with Victoria Øverby Steinland from Balansekunst, who will lead the session into a workshop. So I'm really curious to explore what will emerge in this meeting today. And I also would like to remind you that tomorrow, for those of us who are in Rome, we will meet at Circolo Scandinavo to continue the workshop and to start on a drafted action plan on how to go further together. So thank you so much, all of you who have made this happen with us. And now I give the floor to Victoria.
Thank you very much, Linda, and thank you so much for having me. My name is Victoria. I work in Balansekunst, which is a Norwegian association which translates to the art of balance. We are an association consisting of more than 100 member organizations who work together to promote equality and diversity within arts and culture. I'm very excited to be a part of this digital seminar where we are sharing our thoughts and ideas around the topic of gender equality and diversity in the arts. Later on, we will make room for some group discussions for all to join. But first off, we will hear from 6 speakers who will provide us with some interesting perspectives. So I will first introduce our first speaker. Tanja Sæther is the founding director of Coast Contemporary, an international assembly, journey, and platform generating new ideas and collaborations for art workers. She's also the head of a new equality program for women in the arts. The program is aimed at improving gender equality and working possibilities when a woman reaches a certain age or after childbirth. The new initiative is supported by the Arts Council in Norway and is a part of Coast Contemporary's platform. And as an artist herself, Tanja Sæther has a long history within the artist unions in Norway and with solidarity, economics, and activism. And so before I hand the word over to Tanja, I'm just gonna remind everyone that please try to keep your microphone muted in this session while we have our speakers presenting for us. All right, Tanja, over to you.
Thank you, Victoria. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tanja Sæther, and I would like to thank Linda Gaarder and the Nordic Embassies for inviting me to speak about these important issues that you're addressing here today. I'm very happy to be here. I've been asked to speak a little bit about the situation in Norway, and I will try to do that, and about Close Contemporaries' work. As Victoria mentioned, Close Contemporary is a platform for networking and new collaborations, and we have generated 220 collaborations in 10 countries after 4 editions. And I've been working together with Kenneth Varpe since 2017 with this platform. And COST is supported by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Bergen and Trondheim Municipality, Koro Art in Public Space, and the Arts Council. We have launched a new program, the start of a new program aimed at improving the inequality for women in the arts after a certain age or after childbirth. So that's where my main focus is. The problems in a woman's career in Norway occurs quite late, often after the age of 35 to 40, or after childbirth. And the problems with having children is rarely addressed, and the women we have spoken to feel that they have to hide the mother side of life instead of embracing it. In Norway, female artists have less children than the rest of the population, while male artists have more children than the rest of the population. And according to a report by Christoffersen in 2017, in Norway, the pay gap between male and female is 14%. But if you look at the art sector, the visual arts, the pay gap is 27%. So we are far behind the rest of society, even if we like to think of ourselves as cutting edge when it comes to equality. We are not. And I wasn't even aware of this huge problem myself until I turned older and started seeing established colleagues just disappearing slowly, often related to having a child and taking on extra work as a guide at a museum or arts and crafts teacher, for example, to secure the family income. And all of a sudden, many of them were gone, while the man in the relationship had time to establish himself. And this is a problem that occurs over time. It's hard to notice. And the artists very often have no one to address or complain to. So it's also a part, it's an important part of a loneliness that can occur. Because artists work for themselves and are free. So with Close Contemporaries' new program, we want to produce helpful and practical solutions for the artists, artist couples, and institutions. And it's very important for us that this work doesn't become just content within reports, research, or debates, but that we can come up with practical solutions that are actually helpful and that we make it easier for female artists and artists. Some of the work we do with this program is international, but the base of content is made here in Norway, as that's where we are based. But we hope to implement it in other countries when the timing is right. Some of the most obvious solutions, such as offering to postpone an exhibition if the artist becomes pregnant, creating a space to breastfeed during install or opening night, help with childcare for the artist and always pay a fee and never ask an artist to participate for exposure, or offering an artist to travel with the child to the exhibition. is normal in some countries and never heard of in others. So the problems are, of course, very different. Feedback also tells us that family residencies where you can bring your child isn't necessarily that relevant, because as your child grows older, it's hard to take them out of the known surroundings such as kindergarten and school. And also many of the women mentioned that if they actually have the time to do a residency, they want to do that alone without family and kids. So childcare and housekeeping is a part of the problem. So we will work closely with the vulnerable personal and domestic issues within the art scene itself. The external factors are many, such as background, privilege, what collectors and museums choose to buy, and that pregnant women are seen as a risk by galleries. And those are things that we can't affect perhaps that much, and we will focus on the domestic issues within the art scene. In Norway, there is many female leaders of large art institutions, and I think that's great news for everyone. Yeah, I think that motherhood should be welcomed within the arts, and that it's up to us to solve this problem and have a long-term perspective so we can make it better for future generations. And with this, I thank you, and I look forward to spending the next hours with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tanya. Yeah, I'm hoping we can bring all of these perspectives with us into the discussions that we will have later on. Thank you so much. So our next speaker is Magdalena Malm. She is an artistic director, curator, and advisor on organizational development. She's the former director of the Swedish Public Art Agency and was the founding director of Mobile Art Production. She has curated several exhibitions, and she is also the editor of the anthologies Curating Context and Imagining Audience. So with that, I give the word to you, Magdalena.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I will be spending quite a bit of time in Rome in the coming years, so this is my introduction. Very happy for that. I will start by talking about the on an organizational level. How do we work with these issues? I started an organization called Mobile Art Production, where I wanted to find new ways and forms of working with artists. So I saw that the gallery space allowed for certain expressions, but a lot of expressions that were context-specific, durational, performative, didn't fit in the gallery space. So the whole idea was to invite artists to realize their visions, or even curators, regardless of the space. So we would find the space that fitted best with the project and do entire productions. That was also, I think that diversity and equality was just totally integrated in that whole project. And then I was asked to be the director of the Swedish Public Art Agency, which works with public art in Sweden on a national level. And at that point was very conservative. It was a permanent work in the square, as you would imagine, a very traditional kind of public art. And my experience was that artists were working in very new ways. They were working with urban development, they were working with citizens' dialogues, with issues of equity, equality, and so on. So what we did was open up that structure to enable for artistic practice. And it's important because, at least in Sweden, in the public art, you actually get paid for all the work you do. It's one of the only fields where you get paid. So therefore, it's really important that it's not a conservative field, but it's opening up to the most advanced new practices within the art field. It's super important to do that transformation and to see the potential of how we can transform the 1% rule into really relevant new kinds of artistic practice. So this was my mission, to do that and inspire also municipalities to work in new ways with public art and look at what artists are doing basically and enable that. And I was the first female director in 75 years. It was very interesting. It was a very old-fashioned organization that hadn't been transformed at all in that time. And there were all the decisions were made by 3 men in that organization informally on the lunch breaks or after hours. So what I did was just cleared the whole organization. Very obvious, where is the responsibility, where are decisions taken, who has which mandate. So you can always have someone responsible for all the decisions. I also changed. It was a very bureaucratic organization with administrators, and then there were contracted curators, and in the end there were the artists, and we never saw them. And I was like, how can we do development work and new things if we don't have the artists and curators in the organization? So we ended a lot of contracts and hired a team of curators. And in this, we had a gender. It's not, I mean, when you build a staff in Sweden, it turns out you have to watch to have enough men. So that's not usually the problem. But what we did was looking at at diversity. So I had an Albanian curator. I had one who had a background in Spain. I had an architect with Polish background. I had a photographer from Chile, and also from different class backgrounds, because when you work with public space, you have to be in the public space with the general audience, and you have to understand them, and you have to speak a language that they will understand. So you need to have that ear for, well, how does this work? What happens? And this was really a way of making the organization more relevant and more up to date. And we can have a better discussion about the political development in Sweden if we know what's going on in the former East, in Spain, Latin America. So it was really a way of making it intelligent and up to date. And we also were very, you can't register background in Sweden because it's not allowed, because it could be discrimination, but we invited, I would say maybe 20-30% of the artists we worked with had foreign background, and it was 50-50 between men and women. We also have a collection where we made sure to preserve more of the works of women because there were less works by women. So when we made decisions of which works that were not possible to repair, we would be much more careful to keep the works and to talk about the works of the female artists in the collection. Then we also worked with a project in socially challenged areas where we were together with civic society. So we started doing temporary projects and projects involved in urban development and dialogue-based projects. And in those we worked with some projects. One was for women in a swimming pool, public swim place, where they would feel uncomfortable with not having a space of their own. So the Spanish artist Maider Lopez made like a project with plants that they could like sit inside. They could be in the public space, but they could also feel safe behind this plant structure, to make sure that the public space is for everyone, independent on what culture you have when you go there. But we also did a safe space for young men, because we know that in those areas, they often don't have a space where they can talk about their emotions or how they feel or the pressure of the male identity. So I think our end conclusion was that to be inclusive, you have to be specific. It's not that you can be inclusive generally, but you have to understand what exactly is the challenge of this group. And if we want them to feel included, we can't speak about every Swede going skiing because that's not true. We have to understand their context, and we have to build context that can harbor complexity, and that's the public space. How do we harbor complexity? And in that, equality and diversity you can't do it if you don't think about them. It's a matter of quality, and it's a matter of intelligence and artistic development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Magdalena. I really like what you said about having to be specific when working for equality and diversity. So we'll bring all of this with us into the discussions. Our next speaker is Dorte Gjelstrup. She is an artist and a philosopher who lives and works in Copenhagen. She works with a variety of different media, painting, performative photography, drawing, and installation. She has exhibited at many established museums and galleries, and she also holds a master's degree in philosophy from the University of Copenhagen and is also currently a part-time lecturer there. Oh, no, she's a part-time lecturer at Roskilde University. She will now share with us a short introduction to feminist philosophical aesthetics, and then give a defense of diversity within the field of contemporary art. Welcome, Dorte.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And first of all, I would like to say thank you for the opportunity for speaking. I'm very happy to be here. And I will start up by sharing some slides. I hope it will work out. Can you see something? It's okay? Super.
Yeah.
I will play from the start here. Okay, now we have it. Super. Thank you. Yeah. Many years ago, as a very young philosophy student, I first read the text, The Laugh of the Medusa, by the French philosopher, writer, and critic Hélène Cixous. The text, which is from 1976, made a profound impression on me. The Laugh of the Medusa also gave rise, it almost gave rise to some kind of an epistemic and inspirational shock within me, who was also a very young female artist at the time. In The Laugh of the Medusa, Cixous makes a fury and passionate call for the female artist to write herself and her own body into textual artifacts. A call that is also, I guess, extended to the female visual artist. Cixous emphasizes in The Laugh of the Medusa that the aim of the female artist is to write a feminine writing, a so-called écriture féminine, a writing rooted in and rounded by the body, by the feminine self, and by the feminine subjectivity, by the sensual erotogenity of the female creator, and by the unconscious mental life of the female creator. It is a feminine writing that unfolds in multiple forms, a writing that is generous, rich, rewarding, inventive, and ecstatically experimental, a writing that flows in phantasms and which, almost like a song, emanates not only from within the inner erotic chamber and conscious life of the self, but which also originates from the point of the dominant phallic language that has been handed down by tradition, the point where the woman has been silenced. And this in order to shake up and break the dominance of this phallic language, which is of course also the language of the arts. It is a feminine writing that is at once beautiful. Beauty will no longer be forbidden, says Cixous in her text, and which at the same time subversively enrolls the very possibility of social change and political change, change in society between people and between the sexes. It is a feminine writing that institutes and found a radical mutation of things, and in the moment it unfolds, throws well-established structures and power relations out of balance. It is an overthrowing writing a writing which, by its anchoring and foundation in the woman's body and life, carries in it the radicality of narrative transformation. It is a writing that is the writing of the female artist. It is a writing that is the writing of the female visual artist. The establishment of this feminine writing discloses themes, dreams, and stories, and withdraws them from the darkness of silence that the repression of the female artist has historically brought about. The feminine writing founds breakup and rebellion, a feminine self on this feminine self's own terms. A liberation of feminine subjectivity and an arrival for the woman to history, an arrival for the female artist to the history of art and to the institutions of art also, of course. For Sissou, however, it is important to stress that no definition of a feminine writing practice is given. We are, with her philosophy, very, very far away from an essential definition of a particular practice for the female artist. On the contrary, in The Laugh of the Medusa, Sissou emphasizes an anti-essentialism in relation to feminine writing practice. This practice evades codification, and in this sense, it is anti-theoretical and takes on an infinite variety of forms, of manifestations. However, it always surpasses or goes beyond the discourse that governs a phallocentric system, and by implication also a phallocentric art system. The feminine writing practice always exceeds the art system and the history of art, dominated by the masculine. In an emphasis of difference, this feminine writing practice speaks from another and completely different place than the prevailing masculine writing practice. This feminine writing practice is a writing practice that is anti-authoritarian in spirit and refuses to submit to power. It is flourishing, luminous, radiant, vibrating. It is an instance of an incandescent aesthetics. Still, it is also in its genesis. Almost everything is yet to be written by women about femininity, as Sissou says in her text. We are still at a point in history where so many artistic narratives are untold, so many tales and semantic elements are still not grabbed and embodied in forms by the female artist. It can be said that right now, even today, in the first part of the 21st century, we are at a threshold of an explosive plurality of new languages, new visual languages emanating from the multiplicity of feminine writing, practices unfolded by female artists. Practices in which the female artists report through their bodies, by their bodies, and with their bodies, all the stories of their own lived lives, horizons of experiences, and registers of experiences that have so far not been inscribed in the field of the visual arts, in art history, and in society as a whole. These are practices which, in this respect, are always personal in their attachment to a plurality of individual bodies. These are practices which give rise to epistemic testimonials expressed as epistemic tales of what it means to be this body, that is, precisely this bodily, this feminine bodily concretion. In relation to canonicized history of arts, these feminine writing practices are places from which narratives are derived that are radical by their denial of the view that the female artist lacks something, lacks values. One can say as feminine or female artists, women artists, we abundantly have a plurality of femininities, and from this abundance we give. We give as female artists, as female thinkers, in visual forms and in curated constellations of pluralities of artworks, namely exhibitions. An example of such an exhibition among many, many possible exhibitions was held at Den Frie Center of Contemporary Art in Copenhagen, Denmark in 2019-2020 under the title Writings of Bodies, We Know It From the Inside. This exhibition, which I co-curated together with two fellow artists, Elisabeth Torbro and Katrine Erdebjerg, showed works by the artists Lise Blomberg, Ursula Røder Christiansen, Jeanette Ehlers, Marianne Therese Grønov, Lea Gulditte Hestelund, Dorte Jelstrup, Kirsten Justesen, Sofia Kalkau, Stense Andrea Lindvalden, Lillebeth Kuenka Rasmussen, Elisabeth Torbro, Maria Wehrens, and Katrine Erdebjerg. Based on the philosophical aesthetics of Lin Suzhou, and in particular her thoughts of écriture féminine and the writing of the body, this exhibition opened itself up to constructivist investigations of notions of body and identity, as well as artistic renderings of non-binary positions of gender and decolonial positions, all with the aim of providing spaces for visual writings of a very, very broad variety of differences, a broad variety of bodies. Now, in placing this exhibition, and not least the philosophical thoughts behind it, as a point of departure, I would like to go a little further and bring out some more general points in an application of a kind of a bottom-up strategy, so to speak, in relation to drawing up a categorization of artistic subject positions. Secondly, I would like to give a defense of diversity within the field of contemporary art in the form of putting forward two arguments for diversity, the value argument and the resource argument. I think that the whole basic idea of writing the body can be extended, at least to some extent, to all bodies, all artistic subject positions that in relation to visual arts, to the visual arts and the history of art, comprise historically excluded bodies and subject positions. Within the field of the visual arts, for example, these historically excluded bodies can be categorized as queer bodies, colored bodies, Black bodies, disabled bodies, non-binary bodies, bodies of indigenous people, besides, of course, bodies of women. All these bodies constitute subject positions that, to the extent that they unfold as creative artists, add an incandescent abundance of artistic writings of bodies to the visual art, to the history of art, to the institutions of art. Strategies aimed at instigating diversity ought to take into account all these categorized bodies, that is, all these artistic subject positions, the establishment and setting up of diversity within the field of contemporary art ought to aim at the inclusion of a radical multiplicity of all these artistic writing bodies. I think that true diversity implies an arrival to the visual arts and for the history of arts, or to the history of art, all these bodies. Only by standing firm on this can we break with the white masculine dominance within the field of the visual arts and the history of arts and the institutions of art. I see at least two strong arguments for diversity in relation to these artistic subject positions within the field of contemporary art. The first argument I call the value argument, and I think it's the strongest argument that we have. We ought, please note it's a normative argument, we ought to put into play a diverse set of artistic subject positions of visually writing bodies within the field of contemporary art, because a very weighty sample of these very diverse artistic writing bodies creates visual artworks of a very, very high artistic value. Some of the most outstanding visual artworks of our time are created by artistic writing bodies belonging to historically excluded groups. And that is why we want to effectuate a diversity of artistic writing bodies within the field of contemporary art. The second argument can be labeled the resource argument. Again, it's a normative argument. We ought to put into play a diverse set of artistic subject positions of visually writing bodies within the field of contemporary art, because a very weighty sample of these very diverse artistic writing bodies provides and conveys important and valuable resources to contemporary art. For example, narrative, epistemic, ethical, political, emotional, linguistic, aesthetic, and material resources. Resources that in many cases are intimately connected to the lived lives, the actual lives, horizons of experience, and worlds of life, which are precisely those of these very diverse artistic writing bodies. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Dorte, for this very interesting introduction to this field of work. I'm very interested in reading more about this, and thank you also for showing us your presentation with such interesting examples. Next speaker up is Elena Mazzi. She's a visual artist based in Italy, but working internationally. She's a board member of Art Workers in Italia, which was founded in 2020. And it is the first organization in Italy founded with the aim of giving voice to contemporary art workers. It's a grassroots organization which collaborates with experts to build ethical, contractual, and legal tools to protect art workers. So Elena will tell us more about how they work and what they are working for. Welcome to you, Elena.
Thank you, Victoria, for the introduction. And thank you for the invitation to all the Nordic embassies. I'm going to share the screen too. Can you see it?
We can see.
Okay, so yeah. So as Victoria said, I'm a visual artist, but today I'm here on behalf of Art Workers Italia, which is an Italian association. I'm just gonna share this, yeah. Founded in 2020 with the aim of giving voice to contemporary art workers. Of course, with the pandemic, the situation got worse than it was before in Italy, which was not exactly very clear or happy. So what we are trying to do is to create new tools and, first of all, self-awareness to ourselves to try to change the situations. We are art workers, artists, performers, curators, assistant curators, researchers, museum educator, art handlers, producers, etc. All this list that you see here. And usually, of course, when we speak in Italian, we alternate male and female or use the neutral system to define ourselves. So in order to avoid the male definition that usually is given in Italy. Our goals can be resumed in 4 R's: recognition, regulation, redistribution of resources, and reform of the whole contemporary art sector. To do this, we are creating different fields of actions. The first one is political pressure. So we are also, you will see it later on when I go on in the presentation, but basically we are using lobby strategies and coordinating ourselves with other organizations dealing with precarious work and cultural work in Italy and abroad. For now, we are also working in regional sectors, so you will see it later on, but the pressure is both at the national level, but also at the local level. What we do is also to create templates and tools, because we realize that sometimes we are also not aware of what is the tax system in Italy, or some artists are not using it because sometimes they don't have the possibility to reach a certain salary. Also, I will discuss this later on in more details, but basically we're working also to create some sort of, let's say, compressed tools with lawyers and tax officers to understand better and with a simplified language what it means to have certain rights, but also certain must that we have to follow. And then, as I said before, education, self-awareness rising, and consultancy is very important. So what we're trying to do is to implement educational and training activities, doing talks, webinar, public programs, organizing meetings with students, offer consultancy services to cultural bodies and institutions to operate in a more ethical and sustainable direction in defining, in the definition of planning and compensation. So the story briefly is that we started as an informal group during the pandemic. So we gathered on a Facebook group. The original name was Emergenza Continua, so continuous emergency. Let's translate it that way. And we were gathering also to support the theater group that was much more organized than the contemporary art workers in order to grow and be stronger together. But then what happened while creating this Facebook group, we realized that the contemporary art field really needed much more support and also different strategies and tools to fight. So we decided to step by step define let's say a divided group, but that could discuss and bridge with the bigger group that was already fighting for what was happening during the pandemic. So we started by creating a manifesto, and we collectively wrote this manifesto together, and we translated it in several languages. We asked people to sign up, and this was the first step that we did, and that was presented during our first presentation, let's say the 1st of May, when we born in a way. And the manifesto contained a short-term goal, but also long-term goal. Of course, we invite you all to sign up if you feel like. So the structure at the beginning, when we just created this first group, was to divide the group in several teams and working with different strategies and visions and goals. So there was a communication team, an editorial team. There was a team that was comparing foreign models. Of course, the Nordic models were really like a high standard for us. There was a group for non-profit associations. There was a group that was focusing on instances and protections. So like, let's say, with a focus on fiscal protection, contract protection, compensations, social statute of artists, which actually Italy is not included in yet. And another group with a focus on Italy, with the idea to compare also what has been done in Italy before us. So in the history of Italian strikes and fights. All these groups were at the beginning always facing and dialoguing in a general assembly that was taking place once a week at the beginning. And parallel to all this, we were also sharing what we were doing with academies and educational programs. So these are just some of the meetings we did at the beginning. So we started by really like the first important part was to compare the foreign models. So each week we had a sort of short report from the group on different good models that we were looking at, Canadian model, the Netherlands models. Then at the same time, we were investigating the Italian system, the existing protection tools. And at the same time, we were working with having consulencies from law experts, Alessandra Donati in Milan, fiscal expert, Franco Boccardi. But also we decided that it was very important to have a first survey of data of how artists and art workers are surviving and operating in Italy. And to do this, in order to do this, we decided to collaborate with ACTA, the Association for Freelance, on a national level based in Milan, and in the person of Anna Sorum. So actually we just finished this survey and we are analyzing data at the moment. So I will give you some at the end, almost at the end of the presentation, just to give you a sense, a general sense, but we are gonna be much more specific on this survey because it's really like a good tool also to reach political parties and try to make political pressure and change things. And also we were confronting with work experts like Smart Association, which is a European association, and it has also a network in Italy in the person of Donato Nobile. At the same time, we were dialoguing with museums, non-profit associations, academies, universities, etc. And just after that, we started to have and to do some national actions, regional actions, European actions. So by receiving a European grant, we managed to do several steps of this last part that you see on the right side of the presentation, which are still in progress. So we are working at the moment on Decreto di Legge, Italian law, to change the artist statute law. So at the moment, artists are not included in this law. There are just theater people or let's say more general people related to the spectacle sector. So we really need to include the visual artists and all the art workers working in the contemporary art field in order to have more rights and more, to reach certain goals and to have really like a certain focus on also what we need to achieve at the moment and change what's happening. Then at the same time, working on our regional actions is really important. So we are creating several groups spread out in different regions. This is, for example, what just happened in Milan 1 month ago. So we was part of this occupation of the Teatro Piccolo in Milan. And at the same time, we also celebrated our first birthday. But basically, this was a very important moment because we managed to to edit the Decreto di Legge that I was telling you about, reaching out the Senator Roberto Rampi and the Milan Culture Director Marco Minoia. So this is also in progress. And of course, each time we do actions in this sense, we are always together with the law expert Alessandra Donati and the fiscal law expert Franco Boccardi. And related to the survey that I was telling you about, these are just a few data that we got directly from the survey, but we need to better analyze them. But basically, they are saying that it's very difficult to have a family. So many of the artists who answered the survey, which were invited from different regions, part of Italy, different status, different age, they answered that they are living alone or the partner, but they don't have children, or it's very difficult to survive by being an artist and having children. Or, for example, many of them has a very specific degree in the visual art field. Here, sorry, it's only in Italian at the moment. So this is related to how much artists are gaining per year. So, and the biggest part is less than 5,000 euros per year. And the second step is in between 5,000 and 10,000 euros per year, which is really dramatic. Again, the higher percentage answer that they have a specific degree related to the visual art sector. And the biggest part also said that they have another job outside the contemporary art field because they cannot manage to survive only by being artists. So what we did when we got some funding from the European Union was to create some roundtables that we called hyper-unionization. And these roundtables were structured in order to also bridge with other organizations that are fighting for the rights of the workers, cultural workers in Europe and beyond, with the idea also to create a bigger network. So, of course, this is a sort of open course. So whoever wants to join this platform of Hypermates is always welcome. It's not just during that period of time that we did this, but it's an ongoing process as all we do. So we had some people we invited to have this roundtable where we shared, and what we did basically was to define 3 different roundtables. The first one was titled How to Strike, the second one How to Institute, and the third one How to Get Paid. And we were also confronting, of course, models related to other organizations and other realities. And wage is always very important for us. It's like point of reference that we keep on quoting and referring to when we discuss. Because actually, yeah, I forgot to tell you that we are also working on a remuneration table proposal. So the idea is to try to define fees, specific fees for artists and art workers in Italy, because actually it doesn't exist. And if you go to the AMACI table of contents representing the Italian museums, the status says that the artist shouldn't be remunerated for his job. Like there's no specific fee referring to the artist fee. There are all the other fees for the photographer, for the installer, for all the other components, but the artist doesn't require a fee for them. So we are also working in this sense to change this. And by doing so, it's very difficult actually to define what and how we should structure this. So we are also doing at the moment interviews with the museums directors or non-profit centers that we think that are usually very respectful of the artistic work, also to understand and compare what could be a strategy to do that in Italy. And this is, of course, specific to Italy, even if we compare to other countries, because the situation, of course, is very different. What we are also doing, as I said before, is to try to gather in person, because, of course, AWI was born digitally. And so we are always in front of the laptop, and sometimes we don't even know each other. So it's really important to create these informal meetings and connections in person in different regions, also to strengthen the group and to understand who is working where, and to try to do political pressure in this regional level too. So we just started recently, because of course before the situation was very difficult, but also mobilizing was a way for doing it. So in Venice, in Milan, in Torino, in Rome, there were parallel manifestations, and that was the first step to gather together and to meet each other in case we didn't know each other. And basically that's it. Even if I could talk for hours, I will stop now and maybe answer questions in the end if you have.
Thank you very much, Elena, for a great presentation of a very important organization. We will move on to our last speakers in this first part of the session, and I will introduce them together. We will hear from Fulvia Astolfi, who is a lawyer with over 30 years of experience. Her passion for women's rights, empowerment, and equality has brought her to specialize in those areas. She's the president of European Women's Management, and Development Network, which is situated in Rome. And she is also the founder of a consulting company operating in the sustainability sector in the area of gender equality. And she has been awarded many prizes, actually. For instance, she was named Standout Woman in 2016, and she got the Chamber's Diversity and Inclusion Lifetime Achievement Award in 2019. We will also hear from Paola Dorsi, who is an architect and cultural heritage expert. She has directed conservation activities on several historical buildings. She's also curated many exhibitions and museum projects. She's a member of the advisory board of the platform Cultural Heritage and Technology. She's a UNESCO site manager and an expert evaluator of cultural projects for the European Commission. And she's also a mother of 2 children. And she is also very convinced that it's time for women to take part and improve our society, and she's engaged every day to do so, she says. All right, so then I will lend the word over to Fulvia and Paola.
Thank you, Victoria. Actually, Paola is at a meeting which is going on until now. So she has sent a recording of her speech. So what we have decided to do, I will present EWMD in a nutshell, and some of our programs. EWMD is an international association which is based in many European countries, mainly in Germany, but also in other Western and Northern Europe countries. Our mission is women empowerment, and whatever we can do to give the women, young women or women already working, the possibility to express themselves and become an active part of our society and culture. I think that the time has come and we are in the urgency of having women in all public positions. There was a speech of our Prime Minister Mario Draghi yesterday on this point, and it is now very clear that bringing women at the correct level position, exposing them in the work will give value to companies and value to society. So I think we have all spoken about how to do it and different way of doing it. I always say that whatever we do are pieces of a mosaics, and it's nice to tell this today that we are talking about art, but I really think that any and each action we do in this direction will end up in composing a new society and a new social contract. So I welcome any and all discussion on these points. I want to focus on two projects that EWMD is doing. One is Equal Panel. We call Equal Panel a manifesto, but an entire program of having women exposed in public debates, whichever they are. So if there are seminars, if there are congress, if they are, for example, today, public discussions, because we believe that only giving the women the right place in this discussion will enrich the discussion itself, but also the new generation, the younger women, may look at what we do and may think that they want to grow and become one day the person talking and trying to enrich the discussion in the society. So this is Equal Panel. And the other project that we are doing is focused on art. And it was very spooky when we spoke with Linda and all the others organizers, because Be Smart, Be Equal has been a project that EWMD has followed, but we were saying since the beginning we have focused some of our efforts on art. And this is because, of course, Italy, Rome, is the place where the art, or we pretend the art as was born, and certainly is a place full of art. And when we talk about art, we talk about many and different forms of arts. We talk about cultural sector in general, so music, and music is classic music, pop music, jazz. We talk about theater, movies, we talk about painting, sculptures, and we also talk about the organization of art, which is also what we will be debating. So the organization of museums, and in general exhibitions, how the women are doing this, what they will bring to this exercise with their experience and emotion. So with EWMD, we have launched this project, which is called Per la Nuova Cultura, so for a new culture, and it is a study which is done and will be launched with a publication which is named Left in September. but I think I can leave time to Paola's presentation and recordings if you have it prepared.
Thank you very much. And Milo will help us with the recording.
Good evening. Thank you to Be Smart, Be Equal and to our friends of the Nordic embassies in Rome for this opportunity. Thanks for the attention on these topics, very important for us. EWMD is working hard on the topic of the gender equality in the cultural sector. We are going to publish a series of articles on the magazine Left, dedicated to this topic on a monthly basis, because we know that culture is an area with a strong prevalence of female workforce, but with poor contractual protection and stronger precariousness. And despite the prevalence in the total numbers, women struggle to reach the top of the organizations in the sector. So EWMD aims to raise awareness of gender inequality in the world of culture by these publications. The release will start in September 2021. Each article will propose and analyze the issue of gender inequality through an interview dedicated to women protagonists of the sector. Then we want to link the interview to insights, to data, to international comparisons, and to other experiences in the field, so that it would be something also supported by data. The first article will be dedicated to the event of September 29 at Palazzo Merulana, where EWMD Roma will propose the results of the studies about equal representation, as Fulvia has said. So the first interview to be proposed to Left is an overview with Giovanna Barni, working exactly on the theme of cultural management as a woman in Italy. And next, we will work on cinema team. This will be connected, we hope, to the Rome Film Festival, then to classic team, linked to the openings of the seasons, and then pop, jazz, museums, cultural heritage, theater, photography, etc. With focus in every topic, and with a focus on the level of women in their work. The goal of this is to promote women's thinking, allowing, we hope, women to enter the decision-making processes of the cultural sector, both as manager and for access to top artistic careers in the creative field. So stay with us. We will come back to you with our new articles about this topic, and we will continue with this very interesting 2 days with Be Smart, Be Equal. And thanks again. Good evening. We'll see you later for the discussion.
All right. Thank you so much to you, Fulvia, for your talk, and also for giving us Paula's talk as well. And also thank you to everyone else who has been following these very interesting talks. It is now time for us to take a short break, and then afterwards we will talk even more, and we will talk even more together, both in groups and as a whole group. All right, so let's start up again in 11 minutes. So 5:25, we will be ready to have our second session. All right. Also, there's a message. And we will also be talking about whether there are some gendered challenges to work-life balance as an artist. And lastly, we will brainstorm together what we can do, what actions we can take to make the field of visual arts more equal and diverse. So I'm just going to jump right into it. But if you want to add something, ask a question, share some thoughts, you're welcome to do so. And you can use the chat to write something. And then we will bring that into group discussions later. All right. So I mentioned earlier that I work for Balansekunst, translated into the Art of Balance, which is an association of more than 100 member organizations working to promote diversity and equality in arts and culture. And we exist because we believe that arts and culture need diverse perspectives. Art at its best will inspire, it will move us, it will teach us things about society, about ourselves and others, among other things. And as such, it is so important that the cultural sector is inclusive and accessible for everyone so that we can bring all the talents and all those perspectives together, and we can experience art from many different perspectives. And moreover, we all want a society where all people have the same opportunities and where all people can imagine themselves or see themselves in arts and culture. And so to achieve that, we need to break down some barriers that possibly excludes certain groups. And I also find that it's especially interesting to work with diversity and equality within the arts, because art and culture has such a powerful influence to actually shape society. So when art and culture tell a wide array of stories, we can actually make society as a whole less unequal and more diverse and exciting. So, but then there's the question, does arts and culture reflect the diversity of society? How is that today? And there are many factors to consider when we are talking about representation, but to highlight something and to use a Norwegian context just as an illustration. First of all, women are more or less half of the population. In Norway, 1 in 5 approximately have a multicultural or immigrant background. Up to 10% approximately are LGBTQ. And almost 1 in 5 people have a disability. So then the question is, how is this reflected in arts and culture? And I'm not gonna answer that right away. I'm gonna leave it here as a backdrop for this session. But then moreover, there are many questions that we should ask ourselves when we talk about equality. For one, who feels at home? That's an important question, I would say. Who enters our field and thinks, wow, this is my place. This is a place where I feel safe and where I feel seen and valued. And who might enter the field of visual arts and maybe feel more of sort of a guest in somebody else's house, for instance. Also, who can see themselves, who can go to art venues and see art that reflects their perspectives or their lived experiences, who feels like art is speaking to their lives. Moreover, we could talk about, does everyone have the same opportunities? Does everyone have the same access to power and influence? And does everyone have the same freedom from negative reactions and expectations? I'm just listing questions like these kind of to paint a picture of how there are so many different facets to what we're talking about when we're talking about equality. And so I'm not going to try to answer these questions, but I will just give one very brief illustration of just to say that there are definitely some disparities in our field. And this is some stats from Norway, where 7 out of 10 visual artists in Norway are women. Yet, however, this is not really reflected when we look at who's making the most money and also who is more prized and acclaimed. On the list of the 10 highest earning visual artists in Norway, all 10 are men. And studies has shown, as Tanya also mentioned, that the gender pay gap is bigger in the field of visual arts compared to society in general. And I'm sure this is true for your countries as well. I just also want to show an example from the US, where, as you can see, there are a very, very lack of artists or art made by female artists in museums. However, there are a lot of naked female bodies within art. So, do women have to be naked to get into museums? Hopefully not. And hopefully there's something that we can do together to collectively change things. Well, why is it like this? There are many ways to address these issues, and there are many reasons that we could point to why there are disparities. But I want to talk about norms as one way to approach this issue. With a norm-critical approach, we bring attention to the norms in society. We bring attention to how we think and how this thinking shape our society. And we also look at how norms and our mindset and our expectations and ideas, how these ways of thinking distribute power in society. So we're trying to question what we often take for granted, all of these kind of unconscious attitudes and taken for granted thoughts that we surround ourselves with. And just as an important disclaimer, norm-critical perspectives is not at all aiming to criticize all norms, because several norms are obviously very useful for society, but it's an invitation to be critical and to critically assess different norms, and especially norms relating to our identities and to power structures in society. And just to dive right into it, we can do like a small thought exercise about gender norms. Let's all now imagine a guitarist. I invite you all to imagine a guitarist and just kind of close your eyes and see what pops up in your head. And I will not ask you to answer that question, because instead I've asked Google. I did a Google image search, and this is what Google tells me is a guitarist. And so as you can see here, it is mostly men. And there is also one woman in the corner up there. But under the picture of a woman, it also says female guitarists, which tells us something about gender norms and also professions within art. We can do another example where we can envision a ballet dancer. You can all envision a ballet dancer. And now let's see what Google says. In this instance, there are mostly women And then again, under the image of a man, it says in Norwegian, male ballet dancer, which again says something about who we consider to be a ballet dancer. And it says something about how we expect different genders to take part of different professions or different parts of society and arts and culture. So these are examples of gender norms, which means these conscious or unconscious ideas that we all have about what is considered feminine, masculine, girly, boyish, and then in extension, what we encourage or disencourage boys and girls, men and women to do. And it's also about how we place people into these two categories, although we do know that there is a greater diversity of gender. So many things in society is divided under the labels of feminine and masculine, everything from interests to occupations, musical instruments, clothes, emotions, qualities, very, very many things. Here, for example, there are some examples of drawing books and song books for children, which are also divided into feminine and masculine, girly, boyish versions. And when so many things are divided into gender norms, it can be hard to go against what is expected. And perhaps we don't even explore certain possibilities because we're not encouraged to, or because we don't have the role models to show us those possibilities. So then in total, such norms give us, I would say, less freedom of choice, and it makes it harder for all of us who don't fit into those expectations to live as our true selves. Let's see. All right, and then with norm-critical perspectives, we can also address many other types of norms, which I think it's necessary for us to see and reflect upon in order to work for equality and diversity. Norms determine what we as a society view as normal, and in the same time, what we view as less normal or strange. And I think it's important to use air quotes when talking about normal, because obviously no one is normal or not normal in itself. There's these norms in society that draw a line where some of us fall inside of the norms, whereas others fall outside of the norm. And when some identities are labeled as different or less normal, I would say that in itself is unfair, but moreover, that is often the root cause or the root that causes discrimination. And so with norm-critical perspectives, we need to tackle discrimination by going to the root and challenging the norms that lays underneath. And if you bear with me, I'm going to see in the chat if there is, yeah, there are somebody talking about Prince as a guitarist. Okay, I'm going to check out the link later on. But just to point out some other examples of norms, mindsets, and power structures in society that we can identify with a norm-critical perspective. We have a norm of whiteness in European societies, and I would also say rather globally, which I have illustrated with the use of this band-aid, which is often referred to as nude, but then it's important to ask nude for who? Who are we thinking about as sort of universal, and who is considered to be somebody who kind of stands out in that setting. We also have a hetero norm, and we have norms relating to our bodies and our abilities, and there are norms. We have kind of organized our society as a whole, kind of taking for granted that we have bodies that can do certain things. For instance, walking upstairs, but also all kinds of other things. And also for instance, we have norms regarding what bodies should look like and all kinds of ideals of beauty and such. Yeah, and as Dorte mentioned in her talk, such thinking makes queer bodies, bodies of color, disabled bodies, and big bodies, and other types of bodies, like not they. What did you say, Dorte? I can't remember, but it makes these bodies less visible. And I would say that we are losing a lot of perspectives, as well as well, we need to counter that kind of thinking so that we can counter the discrimination that often grows out of that. There's kind of a saying that being outside of the norm, whether it's gender norms, hetero norm, whiteness norms, or any types of norms, it's typical to feel both invisible and luminescent, possibly at the same time. For instance, you can feel invisible in the sense that there is less representation, you have a lack of role models maybe, or there's less role models for you than there is for other people. Maybe your perspective or your lived experiences is not really part of public discourse or in arts and culture. And then at the same time, you can feel luminescent because being a minority or being somebody who represents an underrepresented group makes you kind of stand out in a sense. So with that, I want to ask you, how does gender norms affect the visual arts? And also, because the concept of quality is something that we discuss a lot in our field, how is the concept of quality affected by such societal norms? All right. You will now be put in breakout rooms and you will have 10 minutes to discuss these questions. And then we will return here, and those of you who want to share your thoughts are very welcome to do so. So please press the join button and you will be sent into breakout rooms. It looks like people are back from the breakout rooms, and I'm glad to hear that you wanted to talk even more. So if anybody wants to share some thoughts from your conversations here, you are very welcome to. You could, for instance, use the digital hand, or you could use your hand, and we will try to see you. See, it's also completely fine if you do not want to share your thoughts for the whole group. Oh, there's a hand, Madeleine. I'll give the word to you.
Thank you, Victoria. Well, we were thinking about these questions you sent us away with, and came into the question of language, because these are a lot of words to relate to. So for instance, I work in a small institution in the north of Sweden called MAN, which is man, but it's basically like a women arts museum to work with gender and identity. We work, instead of norm critical, we work norm creatively, which is sort of to make it more fun somehow. We also sort of mention this word diversity, which is sort of a buzzword right now. And it's actually, well, within our institution, we've been talking about it sort of concealing, or sort of, it sounds very positive, and it's actually sort of concealing some pretty important words like anti-racism, equality, and social justice. And it might sometimes mean just people that doesn't look like me somehow. And so that means also like, what perspective are you from? Well, we talked about languages. One in our group was some kind of language professional, and another one was a researcher with sort of intersectional perspective, where you weigh in all different kinds of, well, perspectives of who you are and who you represent and where you come from. And of course, I would say that gender norms affects everything, because it's just about everything, and how the concept of quality is affected is something that we didn't have time to discuss, but I think it's very interesting. The word quality is interesting, and well, there's a lot to say about it. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Yeah, I agree there. Gender norms affect pretty much everything. And it's so interesting to hear that you were talking about language, because I was hoping that we will talk even more about that. And I definitely agree with you on your thoughts about how language can open up for possibilities where we see things, but sometimes even the kind of diversity and equality language that we use could even conceal those structures that we need to actually see and talk about. Does anybody else want to add to that or share other things that you were talking about? If so, you are very welcome to.
Hi, Victoria. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, it's Paola talking. Gender norms affect the visual art as much as in every other field of our lives. I think that in general, quality as genius is something that has been referred just to the work of male. But probably in order to smash not only the patriarchy, society, but in my opinion, society in its total, we should really in some way erase completely gender. I think that this is something that can sound strange, what I'm saying, but have been very much inspired in the last month about Monique Wittig. I think that what she had written regarding the heterosexual thought, it's really strong, important, because if we continue to define women, what is to be a woman, what is femininity, what is to be feminine, and to, in a way, defend our diversity, we give a lot of power to mankind and to our opposite, that is man. I know that society is made by men and women, but this kind of polarization, in my opinion, it's old, and we should really make a quantum jump and goes in a society and try to go in a society genderless. I don't know how to define it. And a society where the heterosexual thought should be not the main structure of society. Because until we will have the heterosexual thought as to build our mentality, it will be very difficult for women, for transgender, for gay, for Black people for lesbian people to find a significant space inside this world that it's built in such a strong heterosexual and patriarchal way. I don't know if I was clear.
Yeah, yes, you were. Thank you very much. And yeah, I definitely think this too aligns very well with this like norm critical aim of challenging all the norms. But then it's really difficult to do so though, because they are everywhere. So we have to work in many different ways.
Yeah, I know. In my small practice, what I do is trying to rewrite art history from a different point of view. And this is why in the last year, I've just been curating female art show. This is because I think that it's a kind of political issue, and I try to work in a political way, and so to rewrite art, modern and contemporary art history. This is in my small, what can I do? My militant way to work.
That's really cool. And yeah, I definitely support all kinds of like being creative about what can I do and rewriting or curating with that perspective. That's great ideas. Tanya, did you want to add something? I saw your digital hand.
Yes, it was just a quick question, maybe directed to Linda, but I was wondering, because it's so important when we are interested in the same topics and developments and improving things, that we can stay in touch. So I was wondering if it was possible to share the participation list, unless somebody has a secret address, because that's I think in the artist unions and also with Cause Contemporary, it's a super sharing is a super important part of what we do, so people can stay in touch and continue to work together.
I'm really glad you're saying that, Tanya, because for us, this is just amazing to open this dialogue together and to already connect you. So we would be very happy that also after tomorrow that we can share the participants' contact details among you, if of course if it's okay for everyone. Then we will follow up that after the workshop.
Great, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for your input. I'm gonna continue to click on, and you will soon have another question that we can discuss. I'm just gonna do the technical stuff. Well, let's see. So anyway, well, I just wanted to say that norm critical perspectives are supposed to be a tool anyway, that we can bring with us when we are talking about societal issues and when we are talking about art and when we're talking about art and society. Hopefully by identifying such norms, we could bring with those power relations and those perspectives into our conversations about art and society. Because throughout history and even today, often it is the dominant or kind of majority groups perspectives that get to dominate the conversations that we have. So by bringing norm critical perspectives into the conversation, we're hoping to kind of open up a bit. And from one tool to another, it has already been mentioned, but language is a really powerful tool for equality. And as Madeleine was saying, it can be used and it could also be misused, but it's really interesting to talk about anyway. And I'm gonna try to be quick, but just as an example of how putting certain experience into words kind of shifts our perspective and how we see the world and its power relations. There are so many terms that we could talk about, but just like for one example, we could talk about sexual harassment, and the term sexual harassment that was first taken into use in the 1970s in women conventions in the US. And before the existence of that word, verbal and physical sexual harassment were largely something that people just thought of, you know, that's just how it is. And then by naming that problem, it came into view as a problem, and it was suddenly possible to talk about those experiences and do something about the issue. And I would say that Me Too is kind of has the same effect. By naming something that is a bit difficult to spot, suddenly we can talk about the pattern and we can do something about it. I mean, even words such as sexism and all the other isms that we use has the same effect, I would say. Yeah, and it was interesting with your point, Madeleine, that sometimes even though the words that we use could also conceal some of the issues that we need to talk about. Well, as mentioned, we could go on and talk about all different, I mean, I feel like there's a big toolbox of words that we use today that is useful for us to shift our perspective and to have like an analysis of power where we see things that before we didn't see. But because we don't have all night, I'm going to move forward. Let's see. I'm going to move forward and we will talk about one word in particular. An example of how words helps us see both challenges and possibilities. The term work-life balance makes us reflect upon our life, reflect upon the balance between our personal life and our career work. And so now again, I'm inviting you to reflect upon the following questions. Let's see. How does working as an artist affect work-life balance? I mean, being an artist, working as an artist is not a 9 to 5. So how does that affect work-life balance? And moreover, and this is a difficult, or this is an important question too, are there some gendered challenges to work-life balance as an artist? Some of our speakers have already given us some very interesting input on this, but I will allow you to talk in breakout rooms for, it will have to be quick, let's say 7 minutes. Okay. Milu, will you be able to adjust the breakout room session so that they have 7 minutes and then we will return? I know I gave you very little time to discuss a very huge and complex question. Does anybody want to share some of the thoughts and conversations you've had? You could use the digital hand or possibly try to just unmute yourself and share.
Hi, may I say something?
Yes, you're very welcome.
We're in a very small group and we're all Italians. So we discussed about the fact that work-life balance in general in Italy is unbalanced for women. But in general, there is a high rate of female unemployment. Of course, the artistic sector of working is not one would expect it would be like the Parnassus with Apollo and the Muses, but is not a particular field. It's a field which participates to the issues of in general of the society. And so it's almost the same, even with the serious issue of money, for which we have seen in one of our interesting presentation before that the income of artists is very low. That means that at least normally artists should have 2 jobs, one in which they are really paid and another one in which they are underpaid, which is the artist. And also this means that normally women have also a 3rd job, the job of, for instance, raising children or taking care of the family, which traditionally it's a burden which traditionally is connected with the female figure. And so I think that in Italy we have a strong problem of this of work-life balance in general in our society, which reflects on art is a particularly fragile field, like the intellectual professions, for instance, academy is the same. And I think that the situation is very difficult to deal with, especially after in a post-pandemic moment of crisis.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much for sharing. And I think you sum up some of those huge challenges very well. Does anybody else want to add to that or share any other things that you were talking about in groups? Yeah, Chiara.
Yes, we also spoke about the curator, so not only artists but curator, and in Italy really is even not really a sense of community of curator. So it's even more difficult to artists. And then we spoke about this idea to work always at the last minute. And so you have always be ready to to work in tomorrow, like for tomorrow, giving ideas, and so it's hard then to have also a work-life balance in this sense, because if you have no time to organize your life, then it's really hard. So we exchange about the situation in Italy, and Anna Maria told about Norway, that she spoke about that at 4:30 people just go away from work and do other stuff, do just relax life, taking care of whatever. So it's really, I think in this sense, it's really different, the living in the north and here. Thanks.
Thank you very much for sharing. Yeah, I think it very well illustrates the need to regulate, as Elena was talking about earlier, and creating some kind of culture where it's possible to actually have a life, and especially, to have a family and other obligations. It's very, very it's crucial for gender equality. Anybody else want to share? So there's only a few minutes left, and I have another question for you. And I'm just going to give you this question, and if you want to share some ideas for actions that we could do to make the field of visual arts more equal, you can share it here. And if you have some ideas, something that you've been working on, something that you're thinking, it could be about what art institutions can do, and it could also be what anyone can do. And I'm very glad, Tanya, that you asked for how we can follow up this dialogue. I'm thinking we're kind of running out of time now, but maybe it's kind of a blessing in disguise, because then we can keep the conversation going. We could share with each other the actions and ideas that we have, and maybe invite each other to take part of the projects that we do. So the floor is open if anybody wants to share any immediate ideas for what actions can be done. And of course, also totally fine.
I can.
Yeah.
I think that something that I would expand more with our friends which are here today in this moment is the importance of democratic processes in the art institution, but in the institution in general, and in the European Union in this moment, because we are mostly in countries inside the European Union, but even in Norway, I think that this could be a question on an issue which is very important in a moment in which authoritarian models of society are especially pushed on our institutional status. And I think this influences the shape of society in general and the world of art, and even the role of art in balance with the society and who buys art, or who commission art. No? I think that there was I'll be short. There was a large democratization of art production, almost a dissemination of being an artist. Once being an artist, for instance, in the city of Rome was a matter of 100 people. That was their everyday job. They were waking up, making paintings, selling the paintings in a shop, like people they were making chairs, for instance. That was not many years ago, until the 80s, was more or less like this. And now there are thousands of artists in the city of Rome, but it's more complicated for them to survive. And on the other side, the role of art in the society is more generic and vague. You don't really know if, for instance, culture really need visual art to survive, and in what sense this is central. It's a bit like the centrality of a writer. Once a writer, a novelist, was very important to explain the reality. Now it's much less important, but more people is writing. So it's, there is a large democratization of access, which is not translated in the largest democratization of institution. It's just to reconnect to the question of quality, for instance. Who decide what is this quality or the price of art? I want to invite you to discuss or reflect about the democratic question in this moment.
Thank you very much, Fabio. Yeah, and democratization is definitely a key word. And Paula, you wanted to add something too?
Yes, just a word. I think that we need role models also in the field of visual arts, and institutions can do a lot on that. We heard Cecilia before in the room talking about the exhibition they are doing in the Galleria Nazionale d'Arte Moderna, because the absence of women, the absence of equality, I say, because I agree with the fact that we need to go on and to talk with a different language about not in contraposition between men and women, but anyway, we need to have role models also in the field of visual arts, because when there is no difference, this continues to feed the absence of difference. So we have role models. If we have Zaha Hadid as a big architect building the most important museum of contemporary art in Rome in this moment, maybe it's a role model, and we can do that. So I think that as a curator should choose more women in their works, and institutions should choose. Well, when they call architects for a project, they should be sure that women can participate in the same quantity of men.
Thank you very much, and I agree with you. And then I will give the word to Elena, who will have the last word before we will say thank you for now, but we will stay in touch. So, Elena.
Yeah, I just wanted to answer the what can art institution do, and I think art institution can listen to art workers and try to build new ways of working in the system. For example, I mean, because we are also really behind in Italy compared to, of course, Scandinavian countries, no? So something you might have achieved already in Italy is not achieved. So basically the fee, or basically recognizing the work, or basically just recognizing the profession will be a very important step. So, and I hope we can do this together just by opening up and listening to each other.
Thank you very much. That's a great way to round off. I will also lend the word to Maria, who wanted to.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I would just say that I'm really happy to hear everything. It's so exciting. We have been working a lot on this for a long time, so thinking a lot of it. But hear you and meet you is amazing, and that. I think we said it before, but it's really important that this is for us the first moment of an exchange. I think we really believe that we can be much stronger if we also have this cultural exchange in a way, where we also go between languages and between geographical contexts to try to be more more precise and more and have a more perhaps a good action in one way. And because I think this is a process. I mean, equality is not a state. It's not a status. I think it's always a process. It's always in process. And that's why we need these talks. And we also need to hear, perhaps today I felt that it's very interesting that we can hear about initiatives. Perhaps we will not make the same ones, but it's good to know that they are there and that we work on different things, but we can also try together to have some kind of common vision, even if we don't have to work in the same way. And I think all these exchanges is, of course, it would be nice to meet you all. So we will try at the end of the year to have a new meeting in Rome, and perhaps have some of you Nordic participants coming with us, or we have to connect perhaps digitally again with all of you. But yes, thank you so much. It was really interesting to listen.
Yeah, thank you so very much, everyone. I too found it really interesting. And as I mentioned, in a sense, maybe it's good that we are running out of time, because then we have to continue the conversation. So hopefully we will be able to share each other's contact info, and maybe we could just write to each other with tips and invitations.